part of my brain died in the emotional region. And it was clear because what I think was happening is I would be having like 2 months ago, this would have been very difficult for me, just talking about the stroke and the event, the emotional, like either somebody like giving me some emotional information about themselves or me relaying something emotional. It was almost painful. Like, I felt like the neurons were having to try to find new pathways that were going over dead space now or something. And I had dizzy spells where I felt like I was going to pass out, or get sick. And I had to like lay down and it would happen daily for like the first week or two. Then it went to weekly. And then it was very sporadic when it happened. And when I cleaned up my diet, because of what I found through you, I noticed that process progressed much quicker, the healing.
Yeah.
This is Recovery After Stroke with Bill Gassiamis, helping you go from where you are to where you'd rather be.
Heather, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Can you tell me a little bit about what happened to you at the beginning?
Sure. So I had been skiing. I'm a ski coach at Snowbird here in Utah. And I had been on the mountain with a bunch of 10 and 11-year-olds. I was fine. And I had this like euphoric moment on the mountain. I've listened to some of your podcasts, and it's been interesting hearing different people's stories and what they attributed, maybe a stressful life or drug use or different things. And, it was interesting because I don't have any vices or predisposing health conditions. But when I think back to like the 20 minutes before the event, I had this kind of euphoria, where I was just like, came out into this beautiful vista and this beautiful view. And I was like, life is great. And I'm so happy right now. And it was like the antithesis of what you would expect somebody, who would have a stroke would have something stressful going on. But I really had the opposite of that. So I go down to the coach's race building, our locker room, and I'm debooting. And I had a little bit of a dizzy spell and some funny vision in there, but I didn't think much of it. But thinking back, it was probably about 10 minutes before the stroke. And it was significant, probably. But then it passed, and I walked to my car, chatting with people along the way, carrying my skis. And I got in my car. And I don't talk on the phone very often in my car, but I had to talk to my 13-year-old daughter who was coming off another mountain. And I was, as a mom, organizing logistics. And the traffic coming out of the mountain canyon was very slow, and it was going to take me a while. And I was trying to say to her, I will call you when I get out of the canyon. And it came out, my speech completely went. And my left arm, I could see my left arm floating across the car, but I had no control over it, no sensation of it. And I was terrified, and my brain was working okay. So I kept saying to myself, let's try that again. And I tried to get the sentence out, and it wouldn't come. It was just the garbled speech. And she thought I had bad service, but thinking back, she said, clearly there was something going on. And so I hung up, and I thought, I think I'm having a stroke. I'm in the healthcare field. And I guess I was like, there's no way I'm having a stroke, but I think I'm having a stroke. And I got my passenger window down and honked. And by then my speech had returned, because the whole episode was like 45 seconds probably. And I flagged down the car next to me, and I just said, I'm having trouble speaking, and I lost my left arm. And it was a cardiologist in the car next to me.
Oh my Lord. Well done.
It was a couple visiting Utah from Washington, D.C., and she was a cardiologist. So I was able to pull over in front of them in traffic. And by the time she got to my window, my speech was back, but I had relayed to her, I'm like, something just happened. And my left arm was still really weird. And an ambulance was there within like 2 or 5 minutes. And she said, you don't look like you're having a life-threatening stroke. My face wasn't drooping, or I was talking completely cognitive. I was aware, but I was also like intuitively aware something had just happened. And so I rode the ambulance down the canyon, and my vitals were completely fine. My blood sugar was fine. And they said, altitude, dehydration, you probably haven't eaten enough today. And I said, yeah, why don't I go home? So I never went to the hospital. They dropped me off at the fire station at the bottom, and I had my son pick me up and went home, and I just didn't feel right. I just knew something happened. So an hour later at home, I was sitting there, and I just felt really like not right. And my left arm started getting weird again, and I felt really nauseous. And I know as a clinician myself, like, often one thing isn't too concerning, but it's two things. When you have two clinical presentations of something, no matter what the condition is, like you have something going on that needs medical attention. So I had my son take me to the hospital, and MRI showed within a half an hour of getting there that I had a moderate CVA in the right frontal lobe.
Wow, dramatic.
So, yes.
What's scary is how dangerous it is when somebody makes assumptions about what's happening to you, somebody else. And I know it happens all the time. And I'm not, I don't want to give anyone a hard time. I totally get it.
Okay.
Because, we are human, firstly. Secondly, we want to think that nothing is wrong, whether we're attending to somebody who's got some symptoms. We also have more, paramedics would have so many people they need to see on a daily basis. So you can understand how they jump to conclusions.
Well, and I just don't fit the clinical picture of somebody stroking like that,
No, that's the challenge with it.
I went and saw them a couple weeks after and reported on what had happened. So I visited the fire station and connected with them and was able to show them the images of my MRI. And it was kind of a neat experience to reconnect with them like that.
How about with stroke, you hardly ever hear about the good luck stories that occur. You pulled the window down and there was a cardiologist on the other side of the other window.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
Did you guys connect after that? Did you manage to find out who that person was?
I tried tracking her down and I couldn't. I don't know if you can call like 911 and get like records of who called. It'd be nice to find her. I never did. She's a cardiologist from Washington, D.C. and I did some sleuthing on Google and came up to dead ends. So haven't found her yet.
Fair enough. Just before we go on, 911 is the number that people call in an emergency in the US. In Australia, it's 000, and in a different country, it might be something different. So anyone experiencing something weird, don't call 911 if you're not in America, or 000 if you're not in Australia. So Heather, how was the time after that? So you've experienced this stroke, then you go through a process of trying to work out what went wrong and how to fix it. What was that like? What happened after that?
So I was at a small city hospital where they diagnosed me, and as soon as the MRI came in, they shipped me by ambulance pretty quickly to a big tertiary, the stroke center of Utah, at Intermountain Healthcare. And I was on the stroke unit, and I was probably the healthiest person in the stroke unit, but I was there for 4 days while they had me on bed alarms that if I sat up or got out of bed for the first 24 hours, a nurse would be called. I couldn't do anything unsupervised. I wasn't allowed to have water unsupervised. I had to have physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy come in to clear me to have Jello. So interesting. I was doing walks around the hall. I had different mini agility things to see if my balance was still intact. And I was able to be cleared first round of all that stuff within 24 hours. But I guess they just were monitoring for another one coming, but also checking my body. So I had leg scans looking for deep vein thrombosis on my legs, which is often with women. I have 5 children, so women that have had a lot of babies or women middle age, that's one of the first places they look. But they say those clots will usually travel to the lungs, not the brain. And they said the shape of my stroke on imaging, on MRI, indicated it was heart in origin. And it was like a wedge-shaped pattern that the edema or whatever presented on MRI.
Wow.
So they did an external echocardiogram where they didn't see any problems with my heart. But then they sent a camera down my esophagus under some anesthesia, and they blew bubbles in an IV. It's called a bubble study. And in that, they found a tiny hole called a PFO. And this is the most striking thing. Every human baby is born with a foramen ovale. It's a little functional hole that exists to support the baby in utero. And then most people will close theirs at birth, but about 25 to 30% of the population does not close it after birth. And they think that in an otherwise normal, healthy young person who strokes or heart attack, they think it's just, it slows the blood around enough to form a clot, which is fairly normal for our bodies to form clots. Usually they're sent to the lungs and broken up a little bit. they think one passed through the hole and then went up to my brain. So they're like 80% sure is what the statistic was, that that's what caused it, because I don't have any other risk factors. So I was like, well, I was a B- student in school, so I guess I'll take the 80%. So they made a plan to plug up the hole in my heart, which they were going to do while I was still there. And then neurology shift change, said, no, let's send her home and give her like 3 weeks for her brain to settle down and then bring her back in and do that. And I agreed to that. I think that was a good call, because the brain trauma from the stroke was actually, despite the fact that I have no long-term deficits, it was pretty remarkable, like what I experienced in the healing of that, like a concussion kind of thing.
Yeah, it is quite traumatic. Anytime anything happens to the brain, it presents differently and it challenges people very differently. So what were the challenges that you experienced when you went home?
So when they checked me out, and the neurologist described to me, it was right frontal lobe, which is the emotional region of the brain, specifically executive functioning. So
If you've had a stroke and are in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind, like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously because you've never had a stroke before, you probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
The news he gave me when I was being discharged was, some people have depression that experience this. Some people experience some personality changes, and some people might miss some basic social cues. And I thought, I was really afraid of that and what that would mean. And I'm single, and I thought, well, I'm going to be single a lot longer, apparently. But I also put my kids on notice to like watch out for these things. But I also kind of had a moment when I was like receiving the news of that, and in the days that followed, where I was like, no, that's not going to be my story. And I told him too, like, I felt so injured in my brain while I was laying in the hospital. I mean, if you've seen me at all, I mean, I'm on social media. I love connecting with people that way. I don't mind watching movies, but I just felt like being in a dark room without anyone talking to me. I just knew my brain needed like a shutdown. Yep. And I told the doctor I was afraid to read, afraid to like watch a movie. I was afraid to like get anything going in my brain. And he said, we want you doing those things. And it made a lot of sense, because what I felt happened was part of my brain died in the emotional region. And it was clear, because what I think was happening is I would be having like 2 months ago, this would have been very difficult for me, just talking about the stroke and the event, the emotional, like either somebody like giving me some emotional information about themselves or me relaying something emotional. It was almost painful. Like I felt like the neurons were having to try to find new pathways that were going over dead space now or something. And I had dizzy spells where I felt like I was going to pass out or get sick. And I had to like lay down. And it would happen daily for like the first week or two. Then it went to weekly. And then it was very sporadic when it happened. And when I cleaned up my diet, because of what I found through you, I noticed that process progressed much quicker, the healing.
Yeah. This is the beauty of it. We can support the healing, and mostly it's just by taking stuff out of our diet rather than what we put in. And stuff we need to take out is inflammatory food. And I'm doing some interviews with a nutritionist and a personal trainer who are a team. They're married, the Turners. They're from Australia, and our 5 episodes are going to be 8 reasons to quit sugar, the reasons why you need to quit caffeine, gluten, even dairy. We're going to discuss dairy a little bit, but Also alcohol. So they're going to be the things that we talk about because they are the things that are inflammatory to the body under normal circumstances. And when you've got a healing brain, they are inflammatory to the brain, but on a far greater scale because it's under distress and it's trying to calm down and it's trying to heal and it's trying to create new pathways. And what you mentioned, the pain that you experience is really true. It's true. It's pain. Your brain hurts and people can't understand when you tell them that, but often when I get overwhelmed with information, overload, I just shut down. My brain just says, no, no more, can't do this anymore, need a break, need to do something else. And I physically, it doesn't matter what I do to try and make it happen, it's not going to happen. That's it. And having that conversation with that person on the other side of you is really challenging because thankfully they don't get it.
Well, and I was concealing it from everybody because I have to support my family. So I was like back at work, both as a midwife and a ski coach. And I remember standing on the mountain talking to one of my girlfriends, and she's just telling me this very normal, benign story of her daughter getting into a minor fender bender car accident. Nobody was hurt or anything, but just the legal drama that was going on with that. And I think my brain was trying to find empathy for her. And all I had was a voice inside my head that says, you got to get out of this conversation. Like you have to, and I'm sitting there smiling, like nodding, like thinking of an escape plan to escape from this very basic conversation. That happens so many times. Like as a midwife, I do a lot of counseling and prenatal work with pregnant women. And I would be sitting in my chair and the voice inside my head while they were talking was, you're going to pass out. Like it was just so heavy. Like basic stuff that is usually I'm really wired for felt so incredibly like almost life-threatening heavy for me to deal with that I was afraid it was going to be like that much longer, but I have really improved. I would have really struggled even talking about this like 2 months ago with you. So I've come a long way.
So what happens when you take those inflammatory foods out of the diet, including carbs? And when I talk about carbs, I'm not talking about veggies, fresh stuff. I'm talking about processed stuff,
wheat.
Right? Yeah,
for sure.
When you take that out, what happens is your cortisol levels drop because those foods increase your cortisol level, which is your stress level. Cortisol ongoing is challenging to the body because it keeps you at an elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure. So you're just overworking. You're in a state of stress, and when you're staying there chronically, it's no good for the body. But when the brain's there, it has this, especially after stroke recovery, has this really spike of the way that it affects people and affects them dramatically. So when you take out the foods that cause spikes in blood sugar and therefore heart rate, blood pressure, and cortisol, when you take those out, then the body doesn't have to do these really quick responses to get rid of blood sugar and pump it out of the blood. What it's doing is just staying at a really state of calm and ease, and then it doesn't release so much cortisol, and as a result it doesn't have that draining effect on the adrenal glands, and then it allows the brain to take more energy from the body to heal and work and process, because that's what the brain's doing. When the brain's under distress, it needs more of your energy resources to get going to do that simple task, which was before very easy to write a note with a pen, and now it's not.
Right. And what's too bad is the hospital stroke unit is serving you like all the carbs and all the gluten and, sugary stuff and pies and like, and in my initial, I'm an athlete and I work with elite athletes, and athletes already know like what you are saying about healing, whether it's an ankle injury or a knee or on this inflammation and diet. A naturopathic physician friend of mine explained to me the science, much how you just did, about why the brain is extra sensitive to those things, even more than other areas of the body, which is why we feel it so much more acutely when we do like indulge in that stuff when we're trying to heal.
Yeah, and when we're quote unquote normal, when we haven't had a stroke and we notice headaches and we notice fatigue and we notice all these things, that's the only way the brain can give you feedback, because the brain doesn't feel pain per se. It doesn't have sensory neurons that transmit pain back to those areas that tell us about pain. So the brain doesn't feel discomfort like the belly does when we eat some food that bloats us or gives us a tummy ache. The brain doesn't do that, but it does represent in migraines. It does represent in other things. So for people that are listening who haven't experienced a stroke and are wondering what we're talking about and how you might notice that when you're perfectly healthy and your brain hasn't been impacted, that is how you're noticing it. And you'll find that if you take those things out of your diet, you'll start to notice a real difference in every aspect of your well-being and how your body operates. So I'm glad that you noticed that. Were you getting people bringing you food to hospital at some point?
Oh, well, when I got home, I had weeks, it's a big Mormon community here in Utah, and the Mormon food chain, it was great because my kids got fed and everything, but yeah, it's always lasagnas and pastas. And it really wasn't until I connected with you, and I think it was you that showed me the paleocardiologist. Was that you who referred that book to me? Okay, somebody referred to me the paleocardiologist, which is like everything you're talking about. It's a cardiologist that married a chiropractor who is very aware of like all these things that you're talking about. And he wrote a huge book. I'm about 2/3 of the way through it, on the science behind some of this, and why everybody, it's not specific to stroke, but preventing or minimizing cardiac or brain events by eating a little more paleo, which is animal products are okay, but yeah, cut out the sugar, cut out the processed, the farmed stuff. And I really like that. That's a really great read. You might enjoy too.
Yeah, I think I will. We'll share that link of the book in the show notes at the end of the podcast.
Yes, Jack Wolfson.
Yeah, awesome. So you're now how far off your stroke? How long ago did that happen?
Let's see. Today is
10 May in Australia.
10. Right. So we're right. And I had, 3 months. So I had it February 8th, March, April, May. So exactly 3 months out. And I had the surgery 2 months ago, early March. So,
let's talk about the surgery. What was the surgery for?
Yeah. So the surgery was to plug up that hole in the heart to hopefully prevent another one. They said if I did not plug the hole up, I had a 6% recurrence rate with all my statistics and health picture in the first year or two. I'd have a 6%, and that was too high for me, even though they were only 80% sure that's what caused it. So I agreed to the surgery where they went up through my groin via a catheter and inserted a 3-centimeter titanium wrapped in Gore-Tex device to plug up this PFO, the hole in my heart. And I read a lot of medical research on it. The results are good. They've been doing it for 20 years, and I feel really good. I felt oddly, incredibly normal a few days after even. And then about the 4th or 5th day, I started having really strange arrhythmias, and I called the doctor, and they said, yeah, your heart just figured out there's a foreign object in there. So I had to really commit to this way of eating because my heart was now really sensitive to inflammatory foods, where and I'm not a drinker, but there was one night where I went out and had a pretty strong cocktail, and about 48 hours later, I had such a huge event in, between my heart and my brain that I almost went back to the hospital to make sure I was okay. And I just said, 0 of that. Like I got too much going on, to be messing around with my health again like that. So, so I'm just starting to I'm on blood thinners for another couple weeks, I think. And then they pull me off of all that and I have all my follow-ups, and technically I'll be done with it all, like out of the woods, completely, seemingly unscathed.
Seemingly unscathed. How about emotionally?
I mean, the first several weeks or maybe a couple months, I lived in fear of happening again because it was so crazy that it happened. I just no cholesterol, no blood pressure, no family history of this, no vices. I'm not a drinker. I just, my stress, maybe I'm in denial of how much stress I'm under. I'm a single mom of 5 kids, and, I'm always trying to make, support us better. And I think there is some underlying stress I've really been trying to get in touch with and work through and accept that I do have some stress instead of being like, I'm fine. So, I'm really I've worked on, I bought an Apple Watch, which I want to talk about because they do EKGs and test for atrial fibrillation, which is a risk to this surgery I had. also from inflammatory food eating and stuff. But it also tells you like time to breathe. And, I try to set like 5 minutes aside a day where I just do like a breathing meditation. And it sounds silly, but I think it does really help me sort of shut my brain off for a few minutes.
So let me tell you what, breathing meditation does. It does. So when you take all that food, all those foods we spoke about out of the diet while you're healing, the meditation actually impacts that in your body in a positive way by doing exactly the same thing. It decreases your blood pressure, it decreases your cortisol levels, and it allows your body to, your brain to shut down for a little bit and to go into a space where it's just being rather than doing. And when it's being, it's allowing for, and as the stress and the cortisol decreases, what happens is your blood vessels change in the shape that they are, so they become less constricted. Therefore, blood flow happens better. Your lungs expand more, so you're getting more oxygen into your blood. Therefore, you're getting more of the healing oxygen into that part of the brain. And there's so many physiological things that change when you meditate and you focus on your breathing, that the 5 minutes of doing that can have a massive positive impact for the entire rest of your day. Yeah. And then not only that, if you find yourself later on in the day needing another opportunity to rest and de-stress, doing another 5-minute meditation from the reminder from your Apple Watch will also help take it to the next level. So then what that does is that leads up into a very more peaceful, more better evening, which allows you to sleep better and allows you to heal better during sleep. So if I suggest to a lot of people who ask me about meditation, the best time to do it is right now, anytime. But if you really want to get a massive bang for your 5 minutes, is do it 5 minutes before bed, whether you're sitting up in your bed or laying in your bed, and you've got a track in the background that will just turn off on its own. So in case you fall asleep, you don't have to wake yourself and switch it off. What that does is that puts you into that space where you're going to go into those brainwave patterns that are going to support better sleep and better healing overnight. And when you wake up, you'll be more refreshed because you'll have had a better sleep. So whoever's listening and always thought that meditation was woo-woo, the science is now showing that it's actually not woo-woo, and the people who came up with meditation many thousands of years ago were onto something. So definitely consider it.
Yeah, I think it's powerful, and I've never really done it before, so I feel committed to it now.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost anything, does it? And you can get meditation, guided meditation tracks from YouTube or from Spotify that's free. So it doesn't cost anything. You can just get it on your phone. It's really simple to do.
On that note, one of my birth clients had gifted me one of those, a session of saltwater floating in those pods. Have you seen those yet?
Wow, I've done that. Oh my.
And I was afraid to do it when they first offered it because it was too soon. Like I just intuitively knew I wasn't ready. And then I finally, just in the last couple of weeks, did it, and it was perfect. It was, and they use it a lot for PTSD survivors, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I thought for this type of thing, it was perfect. I knew when I was ready. I knew when I wasn't quite ready for that. And it was really, really, it's like an hour of just meditation while you're floating in 1,000 pounds of salt and 10 inches of water.
Yeah, bliss. It's just bliss. I've done it a few times, and it's very difficult to get out because, you hear the little bell or whatever it is, it's time to get out. And it's like, have I already been in here for an hour? It just seems to go so quick. Yeah, I love it. People should consider doing that. How did the stroke that you experienced affect the 5 children? What was that like for them?
Well, let me preface that by saying, at first I was alone. So I've one at college across the country, and she was really upset and wanted to fly home. And then my next oldest is 17-year-old boy, who's pretty ill-equipped, to handle this stuff, but pretty good to manage everything at home for me. But, I was sitting there waiting for the MRI results. And of course, as the busy mom, I'm thinking like everything I had to do the next day. I'm talking to friends. Like, I think I'm still going to ski tomorrow. Like, in my brain, total denial while I was waiting for the MRI to come back. But meanwhile, intuitively, I knew. I was like almost having a breakdown that I'm sitting in the hospital alone with no spouse, like waiting to be told I had a stroke. And it was really emotional for me because when they told me I had a stroke, I had a breakdown. Like, I completely broke down crying, and the male doctor didn't cope with that very well. Not much bedside manner. He was like, "Are you okay right now?" And I was like, "Yes," but as a woman, I'm just like processing what you've just said to me and what that means for my life and my children. And I had a moment where it really highlighted my single status, and it would have been nice to have my partner, that I don't have, but my future partner there. So my kids were great. I mean, they you know, the hatches were buttoned down. I've got another driver in the house. But I think there was some overwhelm because my 17-year-old son was texting his sister in the middle of the night, "Mommy just had a stroke and I don't know what to do." And she thought maybe I died. Like, there was just some chaos about the communication of what was happening at home. But then I was able to reassure them, like, "I'm fine. They just got to run some tests, keep me for observation." So I was able to I was pretty highly functioning considering what just happened. And they came to see me in the hospital. So I think we all panicked about their dads across the country and just not like in the picture. So they were really on their own for a few days and did fine. But I think we all were like on pins and needles about what the long-term effects or consequences could be. In my mind, even though I was fine in that moment, I'm like, am I going to have to go into a nursing home? I had no idea. But in reflection, I'm almost glad I wasn't remarried at the time. Even if I was married to the father of my children, and I thought about like how he would have done very well, but I would have obstructed my own healing by worrying about what he was thinking and feeling about me and all of this. And I think it was kind of a blessing that I didn't have anyone else except my kids to like deal with or worry about or wonder what this is going to mean for them. It was me alone dealing with this. And as scary as that sounds, it was super empowering because I could just like do my thing and get with the program and heal and not worry about somebody else feeling like they have to take care of me or anything like that. And so in reflection, I feel like it was perfect how it worked out.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. Not in exactly what your method, but I did have to worry about what people were going through. I was very highly functioning in the first situation, the first instance, and I was walking around and the doctors and the nurses were going, "Well, aren't you supposed to be lying down in bed, whatever?" And I was, well, maybe I don't feel like I should, so I'm not going to. Being up and about made it better for my parents and for my brother and for my wife and for my children who were 12 and 16 at the time. So that helped. And I remember the biggest challenge I had when I was going into surgery nearly 3 years later was actually dealing with the emotional state of everyone that was around us. We're a Greek family. Greek families and emotions run hand in hand. Emotions run high. There is very rarely calm, level-headed Greek people. And especially when it's about children and all that type of thing, they don't cope. So when I was heading into surgery, I had to be the best version of myself to appear to them that this is under control. Although it's serious and they're going to operate on his brain, that it's actually going to be a good outcome. So I was constantly telling them about me, healing myself, stopping the alcohol, stopping this and stopping that, and not smoking and not doing all these things. And when they saw me, I had lost some weight because I'd looked after myself better. And the state I was in, when they saw me going into surgery, I think that would have helped them quite a bit. But why it became so dramatic was because my mother-in-law passed away literally 3 weeks before my surgery. So then we had to deal with the funeral and all the challenges that creates, and then the possibilities of people connecting the dots of death and brain surgery and the drama. So it's such a burden on the person who's going through the stroke that if people are listening who haven't gone through a stroke or know somebody that has, really take care of your state. And I wanted to tell my wife, and I didn't, but I wanted to tell my wife that don't let person X, Y, or Z come and see me. But I couldn't, because she's not the kind of person who would say that to them, especially if they're not part of her immediate family.
Yeah.
Because they were really difficult to deal with when I was in hospital. So I can relate to what you're saying. Your children stepped up, because as much as we think they're not capable of doing anything, all of a sudden they just fill all the gaps and they do everything they need to do, and they're resilient. How have you spoken to them about it since? And now that some time has elapsed, I know it was very difficult for my children to speak about it for a while with me, and we're good now, but it's been many years for me, 7 years. How have they been since?
Well, I'm a super transparent person. Like, when I went through my divorce, I broke all the rules and was like completely transparent about my stuff, their dad's stuff. And they came out of that feeling really close to both of us and knowing we're both just human beings and make mistakes, So like, I've always been really transparent. So they were really part of this with me. And I put them in charge of watching me, like with my, missing social cues, or, noticing little changes about me. And I was like, if you guys notice something, you need to tell me, because you might notice before I do. Depression, usually with, I deal with postpartum depression with clients. I've experienced it with one of my kids. The person suffering it is the last person to see it. It's usually the people closest to them that will know something's not quite right. They're not quite participating or engaging as normal. So I really asked them to step up and make sure they were in touch with me. And one thing they noticed right away is, the family joke is I cry in every movie or TV show with even the remotest amount of emotional moving, scene. They always look at me because I'm usually like weeping. I'm very sensitive and empathetic to that. And for a while, they noticed right away that I wasn't doing that. Like, I lost some of the empathy, died. And it's come back. Like, I feel like now I'm back to normal with all that. But that was one of the things, like, Mom's really changed. She's not crying during movies. So maybe I was a little concerned I had lost a little bit of empathy, but sometimes that's not a bad thing, if you're too empathetic or, So they've done great. There were times where, like, I would feel emotional overwhelm from some of the noise in the house, or they'd be play fighting, and I'd have to just go in my room and shut the door, or just ask them to tone it down. But other than that, it was a pretty normal. We're pretty dialed in. I homeschool the younger ones. We're very close, the kids and I feel like I just made them part of it. And it was really healthy, because if they had questions, I could answer them. And even my 5-year-old kind of understood something was going on. But my big kids were great. I wonder if later in life they will reflect back and it impacted them much more than I really understand. But so far it's been okay.
Yeah, well, you'll know, because you're that kind of person already. You're quite in tune with human beings. You're a midwife, so you're constantly involved with people and emotion and the things that are occurring, and how people shift from one phase to the next phase to get to the other phase. So I think you'll be okay. You'll start to notice that they will perhaps present with some underlying issues that they're not sure about, and then and you'll tune in and you'll be able to discuss it with them and get them over the line.
Well, and I could see how males going through a stroke would have greater degree. I'm a female too, being really in touch and highly functioning with my emotions to begin with. And then having to process with the loss of some of that, but being able to be like aware of what was happening and articulate it, like cognizant. But men, I joked to someone that I was almost more empathetic of men, because, and sometimes I could never understand how men couldn't like deal with certain emotions and I all of a sudden could have empathy for the male wiring and the male brain, because like I said, a conversation that for me would be very normal. I literally was like, yep, I got to go. Like, I can't deal with this. And, I've seen men just do that that have been stroked, just on a basic just the way you guys are wired. So I would imagine going through something like that, it's hard to articulate what's happening for you.
Yeah, especially to a female partner who is female, and I say that in the nicest possible way. We're wired differently. We're meant to be. The female is meant to have more empathy. She has the opportunity to bear children and give birth and raise them and nurture them. You know, men aren't not traditionally supposed to be doing that, and not that we shouldn't, we just haven't been. So that we still have some of that ancestral stuff going on that we haven't evolved from, and I'm not sure whether we need to, but we do need to talk about it so we're aware of when we need to jump into empathetic states. Now, I was the opposite. I went into complete reversal. My head completely switched off and my heart completely came on board. I started to feel things in my chest that I had never felt before. It was called a heart. And I would cry watching movies, and I still do, and I would cry watching a cat trip over, and I would cry over these weird things, and my wife would be going, well, what are you crying for now? Oh, I'm just happy, or I'm sad, or, I'm noticing these things. And simply what happened for me was my heart was able to come to the fore for the first time in a long time. And people listening may not know that the heart has neural structures in it, just as the brain does. And when you haven't used the heart, and you are not somebody who wears their heart on their sleeve, or when you're not somebody who has followed their heart, your heart has less neurons, and it does less. So it's the same as the brain: use it or lose it. And you can create negative neural patterns in your heart because you don't use it, as much as you can create positive neural patterns in your heart when you start to exercise it and tell people you love them more. Just that makes you connect with your heart. And that's what I do now. So my children have seen this completely different version of me, almost overbearing, loving, hugging dude that used to be rough and tumble and, not really give a crap about anything. But I really enjoy that part of myself now and being different. My stroke happened near the cerebellum, so nowhere near the emotional part of the brain. But the impact on the load on the brain was so high that it needed to switch off, and it almost totally did. And I was aware, I had awarenesses, but my awareness wasn't head brain related awareness. I wasn't conscious at that level for some period of time, and it was maybe weeks, maybe a few months. But the awareness of my gut and my heart really was where it was at, and I was noticing all these things I had never paid attention before. So that was where the big lessons for me came from. And that took some adjusting for the other humans in my life, because they had never seen this side of me, and it was strange,
Yeah.
So I related to the first time how women can be emotional, which was great. So I have that ability to now have that for the rest of my life, that awareness. And I was able to relate to for the first time how mentally challenged humans have their life experience. So when somebody's trying to tell you they have some kind of a challenge that's head related, and they can't iterate it to somebody, and we have this stigma about mental health that, well, you look fine, but in fact that person isn't. And I experienced that for the first time. So now I understand how people go through that, and depression and all those things, and how they experience it. So I'm glad that kind of these beautiful things came out of stroke. It's not all terrible for me.
Yeah, I know it is. And I think it helps the healing to feel gratitude, and to also like make a decision, because I could have been like, I don't want to read, I don't want to watch movies, I don't want to do anything that could cause me to feel that overwhelm. But I think just continuing to like walk forward and just deciding like, that's not going to be my story. Like depression is not going to be I don't have time to be depressed. I have too much responsibility. And I really had that mindset with it. And I do think that helped, like staying positive, because I think I could see how people could easily slip into feeling sorry for themselves, getting depressed, and then that interrupts healing. And then they're not changing their lifestyle to be healthy. It's getting worse. And I feel grateful that I captured the mindset, I think, to speed up healing with all this.
Yeah, 1 in 3 people who experience a stroke will experience depression
Yeah,
as
that's
a
what the
result of
doctor
it.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really important to get some counseling, coaching, psychological assessments done really soon. So if you're a carer listening to this or watching this, definitely consider that for your loved one, and vice versa. If you're someone that's had a stroke and you're concerned about those things, just ask for a referral to somebody who can assist you with getting an evaluation done.
I'll tell you how in the US people can actually take a little quiz online, because I give it to my pregnant ladies. It's called Patient Health Questionnaire number 9. They can Google it, PHQ9. It'll pop up this little online 10-question quiz in the last 2 weeks. How often have you been, blah, blah, blah. And you get a score. It's really incredible. I do it for all my clients all through their pregnancy. And I've caught some things with women I thought were fine, but clearly weren't. And then, I think it's a great way if you don't want to spend the money to go, and we don't have good healthcare here in the US in terms of coverage for therapy and stuff, but you can actually self-assess, or have your loved one take the assessment, because it is going to be the loved ones. Usually when you're in depression, you don't know it. And the minute you say, I think I'm depressed, that's usually you're climbing out of it after losing months, if not years of your life, to it.
I see. Wow. So that's really important. We'll share that as well in the show notes so anyone listening can find that easily. So tell me about how it impacted your work, because you do beautiful, amazing work. You're a midwife, so you help deliver babies.
I do. At home, born at home.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did it impact?
Yes. Well, so when the stroke happened, I had women do, and I was like, no one can know about this. I'm laying in the hospital, like, I got my family, I'm trying to organize logistics, and not sure what was going to happen there. And then my work and my client base, and I had like 9 or 10 clients at the time, and one woman was like imminently due. And I was like, what am I going to, so I put another midwife on call through the weekend that I was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days, which is really unusual when you're in solo practice. People hire you to have just you be their midwife. So that was very difficult, but I didn't disclose why. I just said family emergency, she's going to be your midwife through the weekend if you give birth. So when I was being discharged from the hospital, I let my client and really all my clients know what had happened. And I was super transparent, because by that time we had a plan. We knew the cause. We knew the likelihood of it happening again imminently was low. I was on blood thinners to prevent that as well. So I was like, who's going to hire a midwife that just had a stroke? But not only did I be transparent with my clients, but I also went public with it on my social media, which has a fairly large following. And I was afraid of doing that, but I had clients continue to interview me and then hire me and say, I saw you had a stroke. I'm glad you're fine. And I was going to say, it pays to be really honest and authentic with people on this stuff. I haven't lost any business. So I did have a birth about 48 hours after I was discharged from the stroke unit. And I brought another midwife with me because I was nervous of falling asleep, passing out, stroking again. I wasn't quite right. And I was faking it, that I was okay. And so I got through the birth and it was fine, but I'm glad I brought help in, because it took some of the burden of responsibility off of me when I was pretty tender still. And then I had several weeks till I had another one. But just even like my regular office visits, like I said, were very difficult for me for a good month. Sitting through them was really challenging, because it was all the emotional connectivity. Clinically, I was fine. Physically, I was fine. I could process clinical information just fine. It was like the emotional piece, which is really 90% of what we do. And it was very difficult. It was very, very hard for a while.
So you went from, come on, it'll be okay, you can do this too, come on, lady, get it out.
Yeah, and it was a longer birth than we expected. So it was like I let the student and the other midwife pretty much do everything, and I just kind of sat there and took pictures and was just there just in case. But I really outsourced as much as I could of that birth, because I knew I was in major healing mode at that point.
Yeah, it's that denial part of it plays a big role. I did the same with regards to trying to fake things, work related, and it doesn't help. But it's what we know. You really can't be guided any other way until you do it and feel terrible after having done it.
Right.
There's no other way to really learn.
Right.
It's hard to take advice from other people, especially I just found I struggled with trying to understand what my limitations were until I hit the brick wall, and then it was,
Yeah.
oh, okay, gone too far, done too much.
And because it's brain and it's so complicated, the neurologist can't really give you any kind of like normal assessment, because like a thumbprint, everybody's healing is going to be different because everybody's injury is very unique and different. And so I was clear to ski. The only restrictions I had on skiing actually wasn't from neurology. It was from the cardiologist, because I was now on blood thinners for a while, because they didn't want me falling and bruising and internally bleeding. But I was clear from neurology to pretty much resume life as normal as I saw fit. So it was really up to me to find those boundaries. Yeah. And I wouldn't know until I started to go about my day. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm dizzy. I got to go sit down. Yeah. And, intuitively I was like, I should eat to keep my blood sugar up. And I was eating carbs, and I was eating stuff that intuitively I thought would keep my energy up for longer periods of time. And that's what was killing me. That's what was causing the episodes of interrupting healing, where I'd have to reset and go back to bed for a little while or go sit down, because I was eating all the stuff that my brain was like on fire from. Yeah.
I was, so from time to time when we go somewhere and I have a sweet cake after dinner or whatever it is, I can feel the sugar running through my veins from my mouth and my stomach into the extremities of my arms, my hands. My heart starts to race. I can feel it in my brain. I can feel it just doing stuff that I had previously been completely unaware that it was doing. So it does have a major impact. And when you're off it for as long as I've been off it, then you try it again, you go, oh, wow, like that is crazy that I'm noticing that, and how the body becomes used to that and then stops giving you that feedback and stops telling you that this thing that you're consuming is really affecting you. And let's face it, I've been addicted to sugar from when I was a baby. Whenever I had the opportunity to grab some chocolate or somebody fed me something sweet, that's how long it's been for me. So more than 40 years, or at that stage, more than 35 years. So it's amazing people's responses when you tell them to do that, and then they give it a try, and then they go through these couple of days of feeling like withdrawal symptoms, and then feeling amazing and saying, wow, I'm just noticing all these things that are different about me, and then also telling me how they experienced the consumption of sugar after that break that they had. So something to consider. I'm glad that you did that. That's really amazing. When you talk about the other things that impacted your brain, like noise and too much information, some of the things that other people don't realize that impacts the brain is light. Light really impacts the brain. So that's why you sometimes went into dark rooms to withdraw, so that there's no stimulation happening and no noise. And it's similar to what autistic people experience when their brain is overwhelmed with too much data or too much information. And I did an episode with Dr. Michael Merzenich on episode 27, who's a world-renowned leader in the field of neuroplasticity. And he, in some of his studies, talks about how there's how children who learn in a school that is on a main road, the ones that are nearest to the main road will learn at a slower rate than the ones that are further away to the main room. And it's simply because of noise interrupting the connections that the new neuronal structures are making. And light has a similar impact, because light impacts the body by the skin sensing when it's daytime and when it's nighttime, and that switches on certain hormones for certain things to occur. And if we're in a home that's very well lit, and we're supposed to be living in a cave where the sun goes down at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. and we're still at 10:30 or 11 p.m. with fluorescent light, the body puts us into a state of being awake and alert rather than a state of being getting ready to sleep. So all of these things you would never consider, because how could you, when we come from the backgrounds that we do, which is just regular people going about our days trying to achieve our tasks. And this is where the learning is. The learning in how to heal from stroke is not only in what the doctors tell you, but it's in that other part. what the
Right.
naturopaths tell you, what the research is showing, and how we think it's normal to live in a home with lights and sounds and noise and traffic, where that's so far from what is actually normal.
The paleocardiologist by Jack Wolfson talks a lot about that. He has a whole chapter on that, on artificial light and going to bed early, and everything you just described was in there.
Yeah, brilliant. We're going to definitely have a look at that, and I might even try and contact him and get him on and have a conversation with him. That'll be great. I interviewed a gentleman called Alex Fergus in episode 11 who is just a real cool dude. He's a New Zealand guy who does bodybuilding, and he's just into being healthy, and thankfully he's never experienced any health dramas. And I interviewed him, and we talked about how blue light can affect sleep. And he walks around his home at night with red light globes everywhere, so that he can, as much as possible, mimic what would happen in front of a campfire when the sun goes down. He switches off all the little LED lights around his home. Have all got sticky tape on them, so there's no possibility of artificial light interfering with his sleep habits and his pattern. And he teaches that to corporate people, and he's noticed a massive difference in his life. And imagine if he's noticing a massive difference in his life, if the people listening and watching this just do just a little bit of these things that you and I have discussed already, they'll feel something better. So we don't want to overwhelm people, but just think about these little things as little bits of information that you might want to consider.
Yeah, and midwives, there's some great texts and books on there on light and how it affects the artificial light and night lights. That if left alone in a dark room, women's even gynecological cycles will cycle with the moon usually. But when we're in urban settings and artificial lights and not strong window coverings, and we're not in our cave, that tends to, they think, cause a lot of whether it's fertility issues or gynecological issues. There's a lot about this artificial light stuff that affects all aspects of our health. Yeah.
Wow. So tell me, as we come to wrap up a little bit, before we do, tell me, what is your main concern that you're left with now?
The huge hospital bill in the United States. I think the bill between the stroke and the heart surgery is $70,000. So in terms of my healing, and that, by the way, there's good news on that, which I'll report on at some point later, in my own community. But there is some private healthcare that's going to pick up 90% of it, which will be great. In terms of my own long term, I fear of having another one that's more profound, that leaves me debilitated. I live in pretty constant fear of that. So I'd say I'd scaled back my physical activity, skiing. I normally would be skiing still this time of year here in Utah, and I really haven't gone at all. And just, I want to be able to make sure I can still support my family and, not be impacted and not have this deter me on having a normal ability to repartner and have them worried that they're going to be a caretaker for someone who's likely to stroke again. So I think those are just my big issues, because I feel like from this one, I feel pretty fully recovered, but I am also treading lightly because I know how significant it was and how significant it could have been.
Yeah, treading lightly is a good thing. It's still very early days, and you are doing well, and you are recovering, and you're healing, and most of the challenges have been resolved. The heart, the clip inside that's closed the hole, that's all good. So you're doing everything that you could possibly do. You're going to get a really good outcome. But I think if you just tread lightly, it'll give you enough time for you to come back into your own space and heal yourself. That emotional healing that you need, and also pay attention to whether you are stressed or not, and all the other little things that we are in denial about. And I think
it's easy to slip into denial.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And that's the treading lightly and doing less is most likely going to be more beneficial to that aspect of your healing and your recovery, rather than keeping yourself occupied and busy and avoiding facing it. Just face it a bit earlier and get it out of the way sooner. And hopefully that will mean that you get to look back and reflect in a year from now and go, well, I made the right decision by treading lightly. Yes, I love to ski, but the mountains are going to be covered for snow for a little while longer, in our lifetime. So let's go ski when we can, when things are really truly back on track, and skiing is again the priority, because it's not a priority at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for giving me permission to tread lightly, because it's hard to do that for me sometimes.
Yeah, you're welcome. Tell me, Heather, where can people find out about the amazing work that you do, and how can they follow you and connect with you?
So my most active page on Instagram is Shabby Ski, SHABBY Ski, SKI, or Heather Lee Whitley on Facebook. And then through both those channels, they can get to my midwife page, where there's some really neat birth videos. But I would say find me on those two channels, and then from there they can navigate to more of the birth stuff if that's what they're interested in.
Yeah. Now I know the Shabby Ski, what it means. I didn't understand what the ski meant. Now I know that you're a bit of a ski fanatic.
Yes. Yeah, a little bit.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me, connecting with me as well. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to follow your work and keep an eye out on what it is that you do and on you. And if you need anything, please feel free to send me a message. That's the best thing that you could have done.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate, and I'd like to encourage people to connect that way with us, with whomever they feel that they need to connect to. That's what my goal has been to make it easier for people who are recovering from stroke to navigate stroke recovery, because that's what I needed when I started 7 years ago, and I didn't have anything, and I didn't know enough, and the doctors didn't. And you wouldn't believe in 7 years how far we have progressed with the information about additional things that we can do ourselves to help heal our brain, that are in line with what the doctors are doing and are supporting what the doctors are doing, because we don't want to put the doctors, we don't want to give doctors a hard time. Without them, we wouldn't be here. So whoever thinks that they need to go down the alternative path, you need both. Don't do that. So I love sharing people's stories. It makes me feel good when I help people do that. So thank you for making me feel good and playing a part in that.
Thanks. I'm so grateful you have this community built. I'm glad I found you.
Discover how to support your recovery after stroke. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com.